The mud-slicked trench stretched out beneath a leaden sky, the clang of a distant artillery piece echoing as a line of British riflemen shuffled forward, their boots squelching in the churned earth, helmets glinting with the faint sheen of rain-soaked steel. From this narrow slice of the Western Front, you are pulled into the daily reality of a soldier in the Great War, a world where every sunrise could bring a new order, a new bombardment, a new test of endurance. In August 1914, the call to arms echoed across the United Kingdom, the German Empire, the French Republic, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire alike. Young men from factories, farms, and university halls answered the summons, not as professional soldiers, but as volunteers and conscripts thrust into an unprecedented industrial conflict. The first wave of British volunteers, known as Kitchener's Army, gathered in city squares beneath banners bearing the white rabbit-footed emblem of the Royal Flying Corps, before marching to railway stations where black-smoked steam locomotives hauled them toward the coast. Their departure was filmed by newsreel cameras, the image of packed platforms frozen in black and white, faces set with a mixture of pride and apprehension. Once on the continent, the new recruits entered a landscape transformed by machines of war. No longer the romantic cavalry charges of earlier centuries, combat now unfolded amid steel tracks and ironclad artillery. In the dusty forward area of the Somme, a German artillery battery positioned behind a concrete bunker fired shrapnel shells that arced across the sky, their whistles cutting through the haze. The British 1st Division, moving in a column of wheeled supply trucks, followed the rhythmic thump of the guns, their own 18-pounder field guns lining up for the inevitable counterfire. Life in the trench was a study in contrasts, ordered routine interspersed with sudden, chaotic violence. At dawn, a sentry with a Lee Enfield rifle would climb the parapet to scan the no-man's land, a desolate strip of shattered tree stumps and broken barbed wire where the ground resembled a pitted, waterlogged crater field. Below, a distant whistle signaled the start of a routine patrol. Soldiers slipped into the muck, the cold seeping through canvas and wool, their breath forming clouds in the early light. The patrol's objective: to locate a hidden German listening post, a wooden structure camouflaged with burlap and sandbags, its interior filled with copper wires and a primitive telegraph system that fed the enemy's trench telephone network. The technology that defined the Great War reshaped the soldier's experience. The introduction of the Vickers machine gun, a water-cooled behemoth mounted on a wooden sled, turned a single position into an impenetrable wall of fire. Soldiers learned to navigate its roar, the rhythmic clatter of belts feeding ammunition a constant backdrop to their vigilance. Above them, the sky was punctuated by the droning of German Gotha bombers and British Handley Page aircraft, their silhouettes marching across the clouds in tight formations, dropping incendiary shells that set the broken rooftops of Ypres ablaze. The sight of a bomber's engine sputtering, the sudden flash of a bomb impact, and the ensuing plume of black smoke became a grim reminder that danger could arrive from any direction. Supply lines were the lifeblood of the front. In the rear, at a British ammunition dump near the village of Luz, rows of wooden crates stamped with the Crown Cartridge Company logo held thousands of shells. Workers in khaki uniforms loaded the crates onto horse-drawn wagons, the clatter of wheels on the rutted road echoing as they moved toward the front lines. The soldiers in the trenches waited for these deliveries with a mixture of anticipation and dread, knowing that a shortage could mean exposure to enemy fire, while an overload could trigger accidental detonations that claimed more lives than the enemy's guns. The psychological strain was as palpable as the physical hardships. Letters from home arrived in a tattered stack, each envelope bearing a familiar handwriting. Often the ink smudged by rain, the paper stained with soot from the coal-fueled stoves that warmed the dugouts. A soldier would sit on a wooden crate, the dim light of a lantern casting soft shadows, reading words that spoke of harvests, of brothers marrying, of mothers praying for safe return. These moments of connection were captured on period photographs, the faces of women and children frozen in sepia, a stark counterpoint to the steel and mud surrounding the men. Amid the routine, moments of extraordinary bravery emerged. On the 21st of July 1916, during the opening day of the Battle of the Somme, the 1st Battalion of the Royal Fusiliers advanced across no man's land under a rain of shells. Their objective: to capture the German-held village of Fricourt. The advance was filmed by a Royal Flying Corps photographer perched in a tethered kite balloon, the image showing a thin line of men moving forward, the ground a chaotic tapestry of craters and barbed wire. Though the attack faltered, the footage remains a powerful visual of the courage and desperation that defined each soldier's experience. As the war dragged on, the face of the soldier changed. Conscription, introduced by the Military Service Act of 1916 in Britain, forced men beyond the age of 22 into service, expanding the ranks with older workers and even men previously deemed unfit. Uniforms became more standardized. The iconic Brodie helmet, first issued in 1916, replaced the earlier, less protective felt caps, its steel shell deflecting shrapnel and providing a semblance of safety against the relentless artillery barrages that pounded the front. Every breath taken in the trenches, every step across the shattered landscape, every night spent huddled in a sandbag-lined dugout was a testament to the soldiers' endurance. The camera of history records these details: torn canvas shelters, the faint glow of a stove, the muted clatter of a distant railway bringing fresh troops to the front. In the next part of our journey, we will follow these men through the brutal winters of 1917, the introduction of chemical warfare, and the eventual armistice that would end the conflict, but also leave an indelible mark on the generations that survived. The bitter cold of winter transformed the Western Front into a frozen nightmare. In December 1917, temperatures plummeted to freezing point, turning the trenches into rivers of icy mud that soaked through boots and clung to frozen corpses. Soldiers nicknamed their dugouts ice boxes as frost crept along canvas walls and equipment rustled like torn metal in the wind. The Royal Engineers worked tirelessly to maintain communication trenches, but the ground froze solid, making excavation nearly impossible. Soldiers survived on hot tea brewed over small coal fires, the steam rising like ghostly spirits in the moonlight before being quickly consumed by the biting air. The horror deepened with the introduction of chemical warfare. On April 22, 1915, German forces unleashed chlorine gas at the Second Battle of Ypres, a day that would live forever in military history. The green-tinged cloud rolled across the battlefield like a deadly fog, turning the air into a suffocating poison. Canadian soldiers of the 2nd Canadian Infantry Division, unfamiliar with gas masks, faced an impossible choice: flee and risk being shot as deserters, or stand firm and face death by choking on poisoned air. Those who survived carried the physical scars: burned lungs, damaged eyesight, and permanent coughs that plagued them for the rest of their lives. By 1917, the war had evolved into a technological nightmare. Machine guns like the Maxim became more sophisticated, their rapid-fire death thunder that could cut a man in half before he took 3 steps forward. Tanks emerged from the drawing boards of British engineers, their bulky forms nicknamed "male cows" by soldiers who watched them trudge through mud and carnage during the Somme's later phases. These iron giants, weighing nearly 60 tons, were supposed to break the stalemate, yet many broke down or became trapped in enemy trenches, their crews sitting ducks for German machine gunners. General Sir Douglas Haig, commander of the British Expeditionary Force, became synonymous with the carnage. His promotion of Paul's battalions, units composed of friends and neighbors from the same towns, meant that when disasters struck, entire communities lost their entire male population. The Leeds Pals, the Accrington Pals, and hundreds of similar units paid the price in numbers that stagger the imagination. Haig's strategy of punching holes in the German lines continued through 1917, with little consideration for the human cost measured in thousands upon thousands of bodies. Meanwhile, the German spring offensive of 1918 caught the Allies by surprise. Operation Michael, led by Erich Ludendorff, saw elite German stormtroopers advance farther than any force had moved in years, their bright red uniforms and fierce yelling creating panic among British troops. For a brief moment, it seemed the war might return to mobile warfare. Canadian Corps Commander General Arthur Currie watched in horror as his men fled in disorder, their backs to the river Scheldt, their families and homes suddenly seeming very far away. The introduction of poison gas created new medical challenges that field hospitals struggled to address. Doctors experimented with various treatments: atropine injections, oxygen therapy, even tasting the air to determine gas composition, while treating soldiers whose lungs had been seared by chemical agents. The distinctive smell of sulfur and rotting eggs hung over casualty clearing stations, mingling with the stench of untreated wounds and infected bandages. Surgeons worked by lamplight, their hands steady despite the endless stream of broken bodies, amputated limbs, and dying men who clutched photographs of loved ones as they slipped away. As the war entered its final year, soldiers found themselves facing new technologies that seemed ripped from science fiction. Aircraft had evolved from fragile curiosity to deadly weapon, their machine guns synchronized to fire through propeller blades. Fighter pilots like Manfred von Richthofen, the Red Baron, became legends whose deaths in combat were greeted with mixed emotions by both sides. Anti-aircraft batteries